Section 22 of On Benefits. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. On Benefits by Seneca. Translated by Aubrey Stewart. Book 7, Chapters 1 to 7. Book 7, Chapter 1. Be of good cheer, my liberalis. Our port is close, and I will not delay, nor by digressions wander from the way. This book collects together all that has been omitted, and in it, having exhausted my subject, I shall consider not what I am to say, but what there is which I have not yet said. If there be anything superfluous in it, I pray you take it in good part, since it is for you that it is superfluous. Had I wished to set off my work to the best advantage, I ought to have added to it by degrees, and to have kept for the last that part which would be eagerly perused even by a sated reader. However, instead of this, I have collected together all that was essential in the beginning. I am now collecting together whatever then escaped me. Nor, by Hercules, if you ask me, do I think that, after the rules which govern our conduct have been stated, it is very much to the purpose to discuss the other questions which have been raised more for the exercise of our intellects than for the health of our minds. The cynic Demetrius, who, in my opinion, was a great man, even if compared with the greatest philosophers, had an admirable saying about this, that one gained more by having a few wise precepts ready and in common use than by learning many without having them at hand. The best wrestler, he would say, is not he who has learned thoroughly all the tricks and twists of the art, which are seldom met with in actual wrestling, but he who has well and carefully trained himself in one or two of them, and watches keenly for an opportunity of practicing them. It does not matter how many of them he knows, if he knows enough to give him the victory. And so in this subject of ours there are many points of interest, but few of importance. You need not know what is the system of the ocean tides, why each 7th year leaves its mark upon the human body, why the more distant parts of a long portico do not keep their true proportion, but seem to approach one another until at last the spaces between the columns disappear, how it can be that twins are conceived separately, though they are born together, whether both result from one, or each from a separate act, why those whose birth was the same should have such different fates in life, and dwell at the greatest possible distance from one another, although they were born touching one another. It will not do you much harm to pass over matters which we are not permitted to know, and which we should not profit by knowing. Truths so obscure may be neglected with impunity. Footnote: the old saying, "Truth lurks deep in a well," or abyss. End footnote. Nor can we complain that nature deals hardly with us, for there is nothing which is hard to discover except those things by which we gain nothing beyond the credit of having discovered them. Whatever things tend to make us better or happier are either obvious or easily discovered. Your mind can rise superior to the accidents of life, if it can raise itself above fears and not greedily covet boundless wealth, but has learned to seek for riches within itself, if it has cast out the fear of men and gods, and has learned that it has not much to fear from man, and nothing to fear from God. If by scorning all those things which make life miserable while they adorn it, the mind can soar to such a height as to see clearly that death cannot be the beginning of any trouble, though it is the end of many. If it can dedicate itself to righteousness, and think any path easy which leads to it, if, being a gregarious creature and born for the common good, it regards the world as the universal home, if it keeps its conscience clear towards God, and lives always as though in public, fearing itself more than other men, then it avoids all storms, it stands on firm ground in fair daylight, and has brought to perfection its knowledge of all that is useful and essential. All that remains serves merely to amuse our leisure. Yet, when once anchored in safety, the mind may consider these matters also, though it can derive no strength, but only culture from their discussion. Chapter 2. The above are the rules which my friend Demetrius bids him, who would make progress in philosophy, to clutch with both hands, never to let go, but to cling to them, and make them a part of himself, and by daily meditation upon them to bring himself into such a state of mind that these wholesome maxims occur to him of their own accord, that wherever he may be, they may straightway be ready for use when required, and that the criterion of right and wrong may present itself to him without delay. Let him know that nothing is evil except what is base, and nothing good except what is honorable. Let him guide his life by this rule. Let him both act and expect others to act in accordance with this law, and let him regard those whose minds are steeped in indolence, and who are given up to lust and gluttony, as the most pitiable of mankind, no matter how splendid their fortunes may be. Let him say to himself, pleasure is uncertain, short, apt to pall upon us, and the more eagerly we indulge in it, the sooner we bring on a reaction of feeling against it. We must necessarily afterwards blush for it, or be sorry for it. There is nothing grand about it, nothing worthy of man's nature, little lower as it is than that of the gods. Pleasure is a low act, brought about by the agency of our inferior and baser members, and shameful in its result. True pleasure, worthy of a human being and of a man, is not to stuff or swell his body with food and drink, nor to excite lusts which are least hurtful when they are most quiet, but to be free from all forms of mental disturbance, both those which arise from men's ambitious struggles with one another, and those which come from on high and are more difficult to deal with, which flow from our taking the traditional view of the gods, and estimating them by the analogy of our own vices. This equable, secure, uncloying pleasure is enjoyed by the man now described, a man skilled, so to say, in the laws of gods and men alike. Such a man enjoys the present without anxiety for the future, for he who depends upon what is uncertain can rely confidently upon nothing. Thus he is free from all those great troubles which unhinge the mind. He neither hopes for nor covets anything, and engages in no uncertain adventures, being satisfied with what he has. Do not suppose that he is satisfied with a little, for everything is his, and that not in the sense in which all was Alexander's, who, though he reached the shore of the Red Sea, yet wanted more territory than that through which he had come. He did not even own those countries which he had held or had conquered, while Onesicritus, whom he had sent on before him to discover new countries, was wandering about the ocean and engaging in war in unknown seas. Is it clear that he who pushed his armies beyond the bounds of the universe, who with reckless greed dashed headlong into a boundless and unexplored sea, must in reality have been full of wants? It matters not how many kingdoms he may have seized or given away, or how great a part of the world may pay him tribute. Such a man must be in need of as much as he desires. Chapter 3. This was not the vice of Alexander alone, who followed with a fortunate audacity in the footsteps of Bacchus and Hercules, but it is common to all those whose covetousness is whetted rather than appeased by good fortune. Look at Cyrus and Cambyses and all the royal house of Persia. Can you find one among them who thought his empire large enough, or was not at the last gasp still aspiring after further conquests? We need not wonder at this, for whatever is obtained by covetousness is simply swallowed up and lost, nor does it matter how much is poured into its insatiable maw. Only the wise man possesses everything without having to struggle to retain it. He alone does not need to send ambassadors across the seas, measure out camps upon hostile shores, place garrisons in commanding forts, or maneuver legions and squadrons of cavalry. Like the immortal gods, who govern their realm without recourse to arms, and from their serene and lofty heights protect their own, so the wise man fulfills his duties, however far-reaching they may be, without disorder, and looks down upon the whole human race, because he himself is the greatest and most powerful member thereof. You may laugh at him, but if you in your mind survey the east and the west, reaching even to the regions separated from us by vast wildernesses, if you think of all the creatures of the earth, all the riches which the bounty of nature lavishes, it shows a great spirit to be able to say, as though you were a god, all these are mine. Thus it is that he covets nothing, for there is nothing which is not contained in everything, and everything is his. Chapter 4. This, say you, is the very thing that I wanted. I have caught you. I shall be glad to see how you will extricate yourself from the toils into which you have fallen of your own accord. Tell me, if the wise man possesses everything, how can one give anything to a wise man? For even what you give him is his already. It is impossible, therefore, to bestow a benefit upon a wise man, if whatever is given him comes from his own store. Yet you Stoics declare that it is possible to give to a wise man. I make the same inquiry about friends as well. For you say that friends own everything in common, and if so, no one can give anything to his friend, for he gives what his friend owned already in common with himself. There is nothing to prevent a thing belonging to a wise man, and yet being the property of its legal owner. According to law, everything in a state belongs to the king, yet all that property over which the king has rights of possession is parceled out among individual owners, and each separate thing belongs to somebody. And so one can give the king a house, a slave, or a sum of money without being said to give him what was his already, for the king has rights over all these things, while each citizen has the ownership of them. We speak of the country of the Athenians, or of the Campanians, though the inhabitants divide them amongst themselves into separate estates. The whole region belongs to one state or another, but each part of it belongs to its own individual proprietor, so that we are able to give our lands to the state, although they are reckoned as belonging to the state, because we and the state own them in different ways. Can there be any doubt that all the private savings of a slave belong to his master as well as he himself? Yet he makes his master presents. The slave does not therefore possess nothing, because if his master chose, he might possess nothing, nor does what he gives of his own free will cease to be a present, because it might have been wrung from him against his will. As for how we are to prove that the wise man possesses all things, we shall see afterwards. For the present, we are both agreed to regard this as true. We must gather together something to answer the question before us, which is, how any means remain of acting generously towards one who already possesses all things? All things that a son has belong to his father, yet who does not know that in spite of this a son can make presents to his father? All things belong to the gods, yet we make presents and bestow alms even upon the gods. What I have is not necessarily not mine because it belongs to you, for the same thing may belong both to me and to you. He to whom courtesans belong, argues our adversary, must be a procurer. Now courtesans are included in all things, therefore courtesans belong to the wise man. But he to whom courtesans belong is a procurer, therefore the wise man is a procurer. Yes, by the same reasoning, our opponents would forbid him to buy anything, arguing, no man buys his own property. Now, all things are the property of the wise man, therefore the wise man buys nothing. By the same reasoning, they object to his borrowing, because no one pays interest for the use of his own money. They raise endless quibbles, although they perfectly well understand what we say. Chapter 5. For when I say that the wise man possesses everything, I mean that he does so without thereby impairing each man's individual rights in his own property, in the same way as in a country ruled by a good king, everything belongs to the king by the right of his authority, and to the people by their several rights of ownership. This I shall prove in its proper place. In the meantime, it is a sufficient answer to the question to declare that I am able to give to the wise man that which is in one way mine, and in another way his. Nor is it strange that I should be able to give anything to one who possesses everything. Suppose I have hired a house from you. Some part of that house is mine, some is yours. The house itself is yours, the use of your house belongs to me. Crops may ripen upon your land, but you cannot touch them against the will of your tenant. And if corn be dear, or at famine price, you will, in vain another's mighty store behold, grown upon your land, lying upon your land, and to be deposited in your own barns. Though you be the landlord, you must not enter my hired house, nor may you take away your own slave from me if I have contracted for his services. Nay, if I hire a carriage from you, I bestow a benefit by allowing you to take your seat in it, although it is your own. You see, therefore, that it is possible for a man to receive a present by accepting what is his own. Chapter 6. In all the cases which I have mentioned, each party is the owner of the same thing. How is this? It is because the one owns the thing, the other owns the use of the thing. We speak of the books of Cicero. Doris, the bookseller, calls these same books his own. The one claims them because he wrote them, the other because he bought them, so that they may quite correctly be spoken of as belonging to either of the two, for they do belong to each, though in a different manner. Thus Titus Livius may receive as a present, or may buy his own books from Doris. Although the wise man possesses everything, yet I can give him what I individually possess. For though, king-like, he in his mind possesses everything, yet the ownership of all things is divided among various individuals, so that he can both receive a present and owe one, can buy or hire things. Everything belongs to Caesar, yet he has no private property beyond his own privy purse. As emperor, all things are his, but nothing is his own except what he inherits. It is possible, without treason, to discuss what is and what is not his, for even what the court may decide not to be his, from another point of view, is his. In the same way, the wise man in his mind possesses everything. In actual right and ownership, he possesses only his own property. Chapter 7. Bion is able to prove by argument at one time that everyone is sacrilegious, at another that no one is. When he is in a mood for casting all men down the Tarpeian rock, he says, "Whosoever touches that which belongs to the gods, and consumes it or converts it to his own uses, is sacrilegious." But all things belong to the gods, so that whatever thing anyone touches belongs to them to whom all belongs. Whoever, therefore, touches anything is sacrilegious. Again, when he bids men break open temples and pillage the capital without fear of the wrath of heaven, he declares that no one can be sacrilegious, because whatever a man takes away, he takes from one place which belongs to the gods into another place which belongs to the gods. The answer to this is that all places do indeed belong to the gods, but all are not consecrated to them, and that sacrilege can only be done in places solemnly dedicated to heaven. Thus, also, the whole world is a temple of the immortal gods, and indeed the only one worthy of their greatness and splendor. And yet there is a distinction between things sacred and profane. All things which it is lawful to do under the sky and the stars are not lawful to do within consecrated walls. The sacrilegious man cannot do God any harm, for he is placed beyond his reach by his divine nature. Yet he is punished because he seems to have done him harm. His punishment is demanded by our feeling on the matter, and even by his own. In the same way, therefore, as he who carries off any sacred things is regarded as sacrilegious, although that which he stole is nevertheless within the limits of the world, so it is possible to steal from a wise man. For in that case it will be some, not of that universe which he possesses, but some of those things of which he is the acknowledged owner, and which are severally his own property, which will be stolen from him. The former of these possessions he will recognize as his own. The latter he will be unwilling, even if he be able to possess. He will say, as that Roman commander said, when, to reward his courage and good service to the state, he was assigned as much land as he could enclose in one day's plowing. "You do not," said he, "want a citizen who wants more than is enough for one citizen." Do you not think that it required a much greater man to refuse this reward than to earn it? For many have taken away the landmarks of other men's property, but no one sets up limits to his own. End of section 22. Recorded by John Pederson.